Hello, hello. I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in an episode of Running to Write, where I give questionable writing advice through running metaphors. Yeah, we're going live, so I'm already kind of fumbling through the words. Happy Monday night, I guess. For those of you in the US, I hope you enjoyed your Labor Day. If you had a 3-day weekend, if not, I'm sorry. We really need a lot more of these. A lot more 3-day weekends. I'm a big fan of them. Definitely a good idea to get 2 full days of rest before I get back into the waking up early to get to work. Also, thank you for joining us. So let's see here. We have Self-Publishing with Andy. We have Richard Holiday. We have R.C. Scott. We have the Writing Sisters. Nicole, thank you for joining. And author J.C. Carpenter. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, Lauren, Writing Sisters. Sorry, author Lauren Adele. It's hard to do the conversions in my head of your new channel. Yeah, so thank you for joining. And author J.C. Carpenter. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I agree. And I'm going to put that one right up there, JC. We need a lot more than just 2 days in the week. I thought now that AI is starting to get popular, that the robot overlords were going to allow us working people to do more with less and hence get more time off. I mean, really, what's the whole benefit of getting AI and a robot army if we can't get more time off? That's all I'm saying. So hooray AI and the future fall of mankind. But for now, we can at least get 3-day weekends every week. No? Cool. Anyways, cool gamer, thank you for joining us. And let's get on with tonight. I've been tagged for the Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo tag. You heard me right. Jonathan Rossignol, who hosts weekly Monday night live streams and manages the Live Free, Live Rich channel. Every time I read that, I want to keep saying Live Free or Die Hard, but that is a terrible movie, and we're going to jump out my head for now. So yes, Jonathan Rossignol has a YouTube channel, and he also manages the Live Free, Live Rich channel. And he tagged me in his own new tag, which is all about indie publishing. For those unfamiliar, again, like I said, Jonathan posts weekly videos on hot topics about things across the publishing industry. He is a big focus on indie publishing, and it's great that we brought this topic up. I wasn't exactly planning it, but he posts, he posts a lot of videos about AI, and I think the videos which he posts that I then comment on the most happen to be about AI because that is a topic of which I am passionate. I mean, yes, obviously AI is changing the way in which we write stories, whether we like it or not. It's changing the way in which the entire industry publishes. And there was one publishing house which publicly is no longer taking entries, basically cold calls. They were no longer taking submissions for manuscripts because of the influx of AI generated content, which is a vast shame that so many people are ruining it for all of us. And that's actually one of my answers for one of these questions. So spoiler alert for that. But AI also greatly applies to my day job. And in fact, one of the guys who worked under me, I got my company to publicly state that they aren't looking to replace us with AI to appease him, even though I personally don't think that they can. It's a whole thing. Yes, you can technically replace myself or hundreds of people with AI, but the results they would get are effectively garbage. So you would be getting more throughput, but what the end results are effectively trash. And there are definitely some companies that I worked at which don't care about delivering trash, but anybody who's anybody would. Anyways, I'm tagged in a video. So while my day job might not exist in a few years, last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, like I said, I had this very debate about AI on his channel and with a coworker. It's a whole big thing. Anyways, I personally believe that the AI, at least in my professional work experience, is still contrived scenarios. Just like if you read AI generated by Open ChatGPT for a book, the book itself will be garbage. Now, you can get really, really good art, like pictures and everything, but those are basically just amalgams of things people have already done, which is the same for stories, but it is, in my opinion, it's a little bit easier to get a great looking image than to get a full novel that has a beginning, middle, and end that makes sense for the characters, that has a whole bunch of different plot points and, peaks and troughs and everything. But we are definitely getting to that point where within maybe the next 5 or 10 years, and, we might be out of a hobby or a job or whatever. So slight tangent, but ChatGPT and other open AI tools are, at the time of this recording, facing multiple lawsuits over copyright issues. So this might not be an issue by the time you're watching this, if you watch it with a delay or whatever. Anyways, I am starting off rambling. But that does mean that OpenAI may be less prominent in the future, and we might get more of a chance to get 3-day weekends and get more time to do creative activities because, in my opinion, AI is not quite there for us. Anyways, I like the semi-utopian future that is presented by Star Trek as opposed to, say, Terminator, The Matrix. Take your pick. Now, long-winded tangent aside, here is the Bibbidi Bobbidi Boop tag as created by Jonathan, whose video I have linked in the description. And yes, ChatGPT absolutely does ramble like this in the stories, in the tests that I've used to create in the experiments that I've used where I've done ChatGPT things to see what it could generate and write. It does ramble a lot and it contradicts itself at times. So yeah, I actually had a video about that. It wasn't ChatGPT, it was kind of like a lesser version, but yeah. Let's start with the prompts. Number 1, name a specific genre that you'd like to see more indie authors write. Well, my reading interests exist largely in a bubble. I gravitate towards the fantasy and science fiction genres, so those are most of the indie books I consumed. If you look at my Goodreads, they are almost exclusively fantasy, science fiction, and things that my friends have written. So, where there's an overlay, there's a lot of overlay, sure, because a lot of my friends do write in those genres, but my traditionally publishing reading list also looks reasonably close to my indie genre reading list. The best part about indie publishing is that we can find extreme niche stories. In fact, I'm researching local authors and stories for my own book and for my own knowledge. I found a woefully limited number of fiction set in Maryland. Also, hello, Mr. Blandis. Thank you for joining us. And really cool videos you've been putting out there. I've seen some of your artwork again. Sorry, not artwork. Your physical constructs. For those who don't know, Mr. Blandis made this book nook for me. I don't know what the correct word for that is, but it's got his book right here, and it's actually a scene based around the world that he created, his fantasy stories. And again, that's another great fantasy series that I picked up and enjoyed. So there you have it. I'm always amazed at the variety of stories being told by indie authors. I recently read a police procedural which evolved into an existential philosophy story with aliens thrown in the mix. Since every genre is out there, my answer to this prompt is that it falls on me to expand beyond my bread and butter of fantasy and sci-fi. So, you know what? My answer is a deep dive documentary style story. My wife convinced me to read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I haven't done it yet. It's added to my TBR, but that is high up there once I get through with some of my Balticon and other indie hauls. Also, Richard, I owe you. I'm finishing up your book right now, so I will, once I'm done with that, I have 2 more to read, and then we're on to my TBR. My understanding is that it's about modern history and video games with a love story thrown in. I've read a few Kickstarter books which are similar, and I have one somewhere around here, which is all about Chrono Trigger, which is a fantastic read. It delves into the history, it delves into what goes on within the story, and it's so enjoyable and shares a deep love of the game. And I want more stories like that. Rather than something fantastical and unreal, I would like more indie authors to be grounded in reality with some in-depth documentaries and specific to some of my favorites. Now, I know that that's extremely difficult. A lot of the interviews and resources are difficult to obtain for indie authors. You usually need some kind of backing by a publishing company, or say like I'm from X to get an interview with such and such prominent person, but that's not always true. And there are a lot of really deep dive. And yes, you're right. I did oversimplify my my wife's explanation of tomorrow. Anyways, hey Nicole, thank you for joining. I appreciate you coming in here. Yeah, so I would like to read more deep dive technical document stories that are by indie publishers. Now, Jonathan's answer was Westerns. I don't know his specific tastes, but if you like your chocolate and peanut butter mix, like a perfect Butterfinger, I think that's the tagline for them. Anyways, I have a fantastic blend of Westerns and magic, which was his Ragged Company, a testimony of Elias Faust. It's the start of a series, although I don't think there's a second book out yet. I think he was still writing it the last time I talked to that author. But that was from a Balticon haul in 2022. And that was a very interesting take on gritty realism of the West, the frontier aspect of it, the loneliness where you don't really have much research. It might as well have taken place in space, except that was blatantly the Old West as a setting. But then you have magic thrown in and dark magic too. So I do like Reese's. I just happen to prefer pure chocolate more than chocolate mixed with peanut butter. And like I was saying, sorry, I will try and not run off on too many tangents here, but it is a wonderful mix of Westerns and magic. So he wanted something with Westerns, and this could satisfy that itch, depending on what you or he like to read. Now, moving on. Prompt number 2. Some of the craziest stories ever written are independently published. Name the most extreme author that you've heard of. Well, don't know many crazy stories involving indie authors. Snickers? Reese's. Okay. Everybody's just shouting out their chocolate peanut butter flavored candies, and I'm pretty sure it's Butterfingers that no, not Butterfingers. It's Reese's that has like the you mix my peanut butter and my chocolate, blah blah, blah whatever. That's the tagline. Anyways, so I don't know many crazy stories that involve indie authors. So I will say R.C. Scott here for the most extreme author that I've heard of. Now, I won't share any of his stories at the moment, but he has quite a few that I'm privy to. And I also live vicariously through him when he talks about all the live shows that he goes to on what feels like a weekly basis. He is always telling me about these fantastic bands and artists that are just going through going through shows in and around Chicago that he attends. And it's so much fun to hear him. I have another friend who has traveled all over the world and has seen, Steel Panther in Japan and like all these crazy, crazy shows all over Asia. And it's wonderful to experience those shows and, more importantly, their passions, my friends' passions, from, the safety of my own home. Now, there's some incredibly big names and some which can only be found on the local streets, bars, and music halls of Chicago. Suffice to say, I haven't watched a live performance, I don't think, in over a decade, minus a few of my friends' live shows. And not to mention that R.C. Scott's library of horrifyingly entertaining movies is never ending, as far as I can tell. We just recently, maybe like 3 weeks ago now, I get a month ago, I don't know. Time is relative. But we watched this Japanese movie about a man who contracted some kind of disease where iron shot out of his body, and it was a horror thing. And the movie was baffling in every sense of the word, but that was apparently a very formative movie for RC. And I'm glad that he shared that with us, even though I'm sure it traumatized him as a child. And then also we have Sasha Black. Now, I know very little about her except what she portrays on her show and her podcast, which is called the Rebel Author Podcast. But she is all about, her author platform is all about countering modern trends. So I feel like those two would be good answers for this. Now, prompt number 3. Share an unpopular opinion about the indie books authors, or the overall underground scene based on my personal experience? I have an answer for this, but I'm going to go through that. But I'm also going to say that there is a more recent answer, which I am going to share in just a moment. So first of all, some books could use a little more time baking in the oven to be ready. Now, I am guilty of this one, unfortunately. Going from my first book to my second, the timeline was significantly crunched down. I basically took, from the moment I had my first book ready to publish, it was basically a year, and then maybe a year and a half. It was still being edited, it was still doing whatever, but it basically sat there for a year of me just figuring out how to do this and lining everything up step by step to publish. And it went from a year, maybe a year and a half, to 4 months. So there were some issues. Now, a lot of those issues are things that only I would recognize, and most readers didn't, or at least those that did see it didn't tell me. So my sample size of experience for publishing was 2 books, and I was doing a review of my book because it was my second book, which had just gone back from a professional editor. So the timeline was very crunched down, and I spotted a couple of last minute changes, which I was able to make for the ebook, but the timeline was too crunched down. So the first edition of my second book was published with things that I consider to be errors. Now, again, that doesn't mean that end readers would especially notice this, but the version that I published, the paperback version that I published, was not as pristine as I would like. And I know I've definitely read indie published books that have grammatical mistakes, which are understandable because those are difficult to spot even for an editor, professional editor. But I've also recognized inconsistencies. And yes, those do happen in traditionally published books too, but I found that they're more common with indie books. So, like mine, there are definitely books that could use another round of edits. And yes, in some cases, I knew that the book that I was publishing had errors in it because I was talking to the author and he's like, well, I got this book line here and I really want you to try it out, but there are some issues that got worked out later editions, but I don't have any of those with me. So in some cases, I did actually know what I was getting into, but in others, it's more of just a unfortunate surprise that I come through and I'm like, oh, that doesn't make sense. Or, oh, that's a inconsistency. Oh, that person's dead, but they're now doing something. And yeah, Richard, I completely agree with you. Every typo, I'm quoting Richard here, but it's true for me. Every typo I find in a published edition of my books is like a knife to the chest for me. Yep. And right this past weekend, because it was a 3-day weekend, I spent a lot of time working on my books and normalizing and making the grammar consistent between them. And there are things that I will likely change within the first 2 books. Again, really, really small details like nitpicks, but if I'm changing them in one book, I'm going to change them across to make it consistent. So that's the first part of it. And unfortunately, we indie authors are beholden to the tools we use. Now, that obviously seems obvious. However, as of 2 weeks ago, Ingram Spark just changed their policy on the required wholesale discount for bulk sales. Annoyingly, this is something I shouldn't experience, and yet I need to raise the price of my paperback version of my book by $3 to accommodate that. So let me back up for a second and give the definition of what's going on, because it gets much, much worse the more and how it applies to me specifically. So the bulk discount is, say, Barnes and Nobles or some big book company that would potentially buy multiple editions of my book, not just one at a time. And so in order to entice them, we need to give them a discount. And now that is required according to Ingram Spark's policies. So it was 35%. And I was handling that fine at $9.99 for my first book at 96,000 words. I was making 60 cents per paperback sold, but that's fine. Now they increased the bulk discount to 40%, which means that if I drive it, my paperback price up to $10.99, it still isn't good enough. That would still be a net loss because of the number of pages made and the printing costs and everything. So I jumped it up to $11.99 to see how much profit I would get, and it was basically pennies. So I actually jumped it up to $12.99. Now that is a temporary Band-Aid fix. And in order to do that, I need to now purchase new barcodes, which means that is going to be $50 for books 1 and 2, which in all honesty means I'm going to be most likely jumping from Ingram Spark to Amazon entirely. I will be joining the evil empire. That's not something I wanted to do. I really wanted to try and stay with the possibility to go wide, even though my ebooks versions are currently in KDP. Except that Ingram Spark, the company I'm using to produce my books, can no longer fit my needs because of an unfortunate change of policies. And this is why it gets so much worse. Because recently, corporation, whatever, who took advantage of the bulk discount, likely purchased, I'm assuming it's the same company because it's the exact same thing that happened for just one book at the same time. But basically, there were 6 to 10 copies of my book that were purchased and then returned within the 90 days. Now, because it was all at once, I'm assuming it wasn't 6 separate people who then returned my book because it happened on the same day. So there's almost no reasonable way that it was individuals who bought my book, unless 6 to 10 people saw an ad that I ran, decided to buy my book, and then were like, well, this isn't for me, so I'm going to return it at like day 89 of 90. So I'm assuming, based on the facts that I can view, that it was a corporation. Now, what that means is that, and I changed the setting, but because one of the great things about Ingram Spark is that I am now beholden to the printing costs of those books. They were set to destroyed, so I don't owe the shipping costs as well, which I'm sure would have been astronomical, and that can get pretty pricey. I think the furthest thing I've shipped is like basically to across the country, I think Phoenix-ish area, and that was like $60 for a single copy of my book, which I could have just sent through Amazon and whatever. I wanted to give them a special bundle with a couple of bookmarks and other things in there and signed copy of my book. My point is that because the same people who bought my book and then realized they couldn't sell it, so they decided to return a bunch of them, and then I now owe $300 to cover those costs, which sucked. Those are the same people who now are requiring a bigger discount through Ingram Spark, which means that the indie authors are getting squeezed even more. And it means that I need to either raise the cost per book or transfer everything to a different service. And I'm sure once I jump ship to Amazon, I'm sure there'll be some other issue that will come up because I'm using a different service, as these things are, I'm getting the picture that these are pretty common issues where slight changes in policies or algorithms just completely destroy profits for indie publishers who are basically making, thank you all for your comments. But yes, that is very annoying that the same people who are squeezing indie publishers or indie authors are the same people who now require more of a discount. So that's fun. I do not enjoy being a part of the evil empire that is Amazon, but at the same time, yes. And yeah, because the books were set to be destroyed. Otherwise, I would have been, I could have gotten physical copies of them back, but then I would have had to pay for shipping and I think pay the full cost of it. So it probably would have jumped from 300 to 600, which wouldn't be the worst, except I can get 10 whatever copies of my, it's probably more than 10, I think. I don't know. Either way, I was out $300 or rounding up, I guess. So it might have been like 250. But either way, there were enough of my books returned in bulk that it costs a significant portion. I think just ate away at all my profits for the past, since selling my books. And so that is unfortunate. Now, back to the good things and these prompts. Number 4, the indie scene is all about making new discoveries. So share your primary means of discovering new indie books to read. I have 3 primary sources. So this was going to be a short tag, but it's dragging on and on and on. So, you can just spend more time with me tonight. Now, number 1, we have the queen of books you never heard of, aka Margaret Bernard, who hosts her own channel by the same name. She talks about traditionally published books, which I've never heard of, but she also includes indies, which, again, I've never heard of. She speaks with such passion for the written word that I find it difficult to not insta-buy the books she recommends. She also hosts a monthly karaoke session with other AuthorTubers, particularly Barrett Laurie, and that is a lot of fun. Most Saturday nights I'm not available, or I'm doing something with my friends, or I'm out or doing whatever, so it's very hard for me to make it. But if you get a chance, definitely do. I think everyone here has gone at least once or attended those at least once, so enjoy. Now, number 2, we have AuthorTube, the people I've met on AuthorTube. I can see a list of everyone I met. Everyone I see in chat right now has a published book, and everyone in chat has a book which I have read. So AuthorTube, books written by AuthorTubers jump the line in my TBR, and that leads to, I guess, a bit of nepotism, but it also, and biased opinions, but it also leads to getting a chance to see the fantastic works that you all are producing. And, I did get in a rut where a lot of the traditionally published books I was reading, I was kind of getting bored with. So I would basically be skimming through them. And, it's wonderful to just be a part of AuthorTube, because at any given moment, somebody here is likely publishing a book, which means that at any given moment, we have something potentially completely new that we can read. And number 3, we have conferences. I've gone to conferences. I've gone to Balticon the past 2 years. The most recent one as a vendor myself. And Balticon is primarily a science fiction fantasy venue, which in my experience has been highly supportive of indie authors. I've heard there's been a lot on the back end, a lot of grumbling, whatever. I didn't experience any of it. And if you are in the general Maryland area, within a reasonable 2 to 3 hour drive, I would highly encourage you to check out Balticon. It's a lot of fun. The talks are great. The people are wonderful. And I can't wait to hang out there a year from now, because I do go out of my way to just explore around. And there are points where I just left my vendor desk in the capable hands of some people I had literally just met. I don't think I handed them the keys to the money box, but I did hand them the card scanner or whatever. And so, we kind of had a thing going where, like, if somebody needed to go to the bathroom, somebody want to walk around, get lunch, whatever, we would sort of cover for them, cover their table. By like the 3rd day, we could say their spiel from memory. And so it was just fun to walk around and see other AuthorTubers and have enough faith in the people that I had just met to watch over my station. And yes, my wife did get a money box, which is good because people did pay in cash, and that made things a lot easier. So in addition to Balticon, I go to MagFest every year. That's a video game conference. And while the focus is video games and most of the art there is not book related, it's usually, it's anything. It's anything from scarves to hats to paintings to etched glass. I have a wonderful Make It Rain glass that I adore, and it's got the A, C down, C up from the Song of Storms and Ocarina of Time. And that's a small tangent. But anyways, there is so much creativity there, but there's not often indie publishers. So when there are, I make sure that I go up and talk to them, because it is usually a very lonely vendor table. And this past year, I think there was only one table. It was one shared table with 2 people there. And so I got their books. I think, let me see if I can pull this off right. Let's see if I can do it live. And I failed. All right. Well, this was a book from Balticon, which I enjoyed. This was the one I was talking about. Well, no, this wasn't the one I was talking about, but this is a different police procedural about a a detective in Baltimore, and the supernatural show up and ruin everything. But I made sure to go up and talk to those two indie authors, and I bought both their books. I haven't read them yet because I'm way behind, but they did look interesting. So let me see if I can take two. Let's see what we got. And hey, yeah, so this one's it. Techno Paladin by Elizabeth Corrigan. This is a book I picked up at MagFest, and it looks really interesting. From the cover, from the back, I see a science fiction world with magic in it. So that is a combination of both things I enjoy. Then there's also, in addition to MagFest, there is AwesomeCon, which the timeline of when AwesomeCon varies. I think it's usually the April through June. It's a pop culture phenomenon in DC. I've attended it for years. I haven't gone recently since 2020 for obvious reasons. It's a very, very large convention, and they often get big names there. I think I've seen Carrie Elway speak. I've seen a whole bunch of people. A couple of doctors have been there. I think I did see Stanley there. This was years and years ago, and it's just so much fun to experience that and see so many other people who love the same things that I love. But I plan to progress from being a regular attendee to being a vendor there. That's my goal for 2024, is to be a vendor. Now, normally I wouldn't, because I feel like the Artist Alley is very similar with MagFest, except one of the authors that I met at Balticon was telling me about it, and she mentioned how they have a new indie author alley within Artist Alley. So it is a wonderful opportunity to explicitly find indie authors at a very, very large conference. I don't think I would ever get that much throughput. I don't think that's the right word, but foot traffic at another conference. So I'm looking forward to being a vendor at AwesomeCon. We'll see how it goes. And in addition to that, we also have local libraries. There's a Loudoun County library called the Cascades Library. I wanted to try and do a thing called Eat Local, Read Local, where they bring in food carts and they have a whole bunch of local authors. Unfortunately, I think I'm on the waiting list for that. I signed up too late, so I'll try and get there 2024. It's coming up next month, but I most likely won't be there, or if I will, I'll be as an attendee, not as a local author. But conferences, AuthorTube, and Margaret Prinard's channel are all great opportunities to meet new AuthorTubers, meet new authors, and find new books to read. Those are all excellent opportunities, which I recommend you take part in. And as always, I feel like I've gone on several tangents this time, but again, Richard, yes, food. So it's almost dinner time, and I will try and hurry this up. But prompt number 5, word of mouth may help others discover something interesting about the underground scene. Tag some people. And apparently, according to Jonathan, if I tag exactly 3, 6, or 9 people, I'll unlock the magic. Don't know what that means, but these are the 6 people I will tag. R.C. Scott, since I referenced him earlier, I feel like I owe it to him to tag him. Then we have Chris Kenny, Bethany Votal, Richard Holiday, Emma Bennett, and Self Pub with Andy. Now, based on the last 3 tags, take one guess when I wrote the script. Spoiler alert, it was shortly after the 3 people. So we have Richard, Emma, and Andy, who were all on a productivity sprint that I joined in. And that was on Emma's channel. I think it was Wednesday or something like that. So I was definitely, in addition to writing my own story, writing book 3 and editing, I was also writing the script during one of those sprints. Thank you for keeping me motivated, Emma and Andy and Richard. And I mean, Richard, you don't have to do anything. You're tagged. That doesn't mean much. Oh, and in fact, you asked me a question. Let me see if I can find it. If I could pick a book that Andy threw at the like button. So yes, please do press that like button. And earlier on, Self-Pub with Andy, Andy made a joke that he threw a book at the like button. So what is one book I would like to throw at it? I don't know. Thought of a good answer here. I don't recommend throwing books because I like keeping them in order. I like keeping them not damaged. So it would have to be a book that I don't enjoy. And as much as let's end on a positive note. So throw my book across the room then. If you're going to throw something, that means that you purchased a paperback book, which for right now is still $9.99. It's not $12.99 yet, although it might be in the near future. And that means that you have it. So way to support me. Although technically, if you buy my ebook, I get more for. Oh, sure, Dune, go for it. There have also been other books that I dislike. So any of the books over the past, I don't know, 2.5 years that I've been doing this, that I've ranted on about how much I don't like them or how much their plot breaks down, insert that name here. And that does it for Jonathan's Bibbidi Bobbidi Boop tag. I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Running to Write. Let me know in those comments whether you participate in this tag. If I didn't tag you, feel free to still take part. Don't let that hold you back. This is a fun one. I liked thinking about this, and I liked ranting about how Ingram Spark changed everything, and now indie authors kind of have to suffer. So thank you for suffering with my misery. I post running and writing progress on Instagram and Twitter as Running to Write. So be sure to follow me and join with your own thoughts. Now that is still assuming that Twitter is still a thing, so I guess I can change that and update it to posting on X or whatever the downgrade version of Twitter is. And I don't know how long I will keep saying that because X feels like a dumpster fire. But, what a way to go. Anyways, don't forget to sign up for my Running to Write monthly newsletter. If you haven't, I just sent one out yesterday, which was all about the end of my summer and my anniversary. There were pictures of my dinner. There were also pictures of a British-themed restaurant in Rehoboth, which was at the beach. And I really enjoyed getting fish and chips there. But if you want to catch up on October 3rd will be the next newsletter I send out. So if you want to know everything that happens to me this month in preparation for Halloween, and as I'm starting to send out my third book for the first round of edits to a professional editor, go ahead and sign up. And coming up, my wife has given me plenty of ideas on several how-to series for writing. So I'll be starting that off with a different angle to a previous video where I did a discussion about dialogue. Bit long-winded to say that I'm going to work on some how-to things. And one of the ones I'm going to focus on is improving dialogue within stories, because I hate to break it to you, but if you wrote a character who spoke like I am right now, I mean, that's, worthy of a book to be thrown across the room or thrown at the computer to press that like button. So with that in mind, see you next time. Until then, find a new indie author. Sorry, screw that up. Let's try it again. See you next time. Until then, find a new underground indie author to check out. There we go. Only took 2 tries. Have a great night, everyone. I hope you get some rest and take care.